Hi Ravi. I think there was
Yes.
some problem, so I got disconnected. I hope that will not happen, but let's try to continue where we are. Hold on.
Yeah,
I'm
it was
sharing.
happening. Yeah, yesterday too.
Yeah, yes. Okay. So w- what I was saying is that let's say that there is a binomial distribution. If I would like to code that into Python, then I'll preferably use a function which is bin. I'll give it a name bin, and it'll have two parameters. One is n, one is p. The n is going to be for that iteration, how many number of trials or how many number of experiments I'm going to do. So this experiments word is not actually correct. I can say trials. Okay, so the number of trials is given by n, and p is also number which is given into decimals. Okay, so this value will go into decimals, and I'm going to refer this to the probability of the desired outcome. Now, if let's say my desired outcomes probability is 0.4, then what is the reverse? It is 1 minus 0.4. Then 1 minus p. So if p is the outcome of the or the probability of the desired outcome, then the probability of the undesired or the opposite outcome is going to be 1 minus p. This has to be kept in mind because whenever we are going to do any calculations, or whenever we are going to do any visualizations, we will have to keep this in mind. Now, keeping this in mind and looking into the properties, if n is equal to 1, we call that a Bernoulli distribution or a single trial. So in case of a single trial, it is just a binomial test of one time. Okay, so we are doing a test only for one time to see how it goes, right? So which is not really a very good thing to do, but that is what in some cases we might do, especially when we are going to take decisions based on the subjective or experience basis rather than the databases, right? So that's one thing, but usually and almost always n will be greater than 1, right? Now, yesterday we also looked into a small thing which is the distribution function which we had drawn, and we had tried to see how that goes. Right now, if uh, if I look at the distribution function itself, I looked into the fact that there is kind of a normal or a very bell-shaped kind of structure that I'm actually getting. Okay, but that may or may not always be the case. So not every outcome is going to be bell-shaped. Okay, not every binomial distribution is going to be bell-shaped. It can be left skewed, it can be right skewed. So we should write that. Uh, we expect binomial distribution to be bell shaped, but not always. Okay, it can be skewed in nature as well. Okay, so it can be left skewed, it can be right skewed as well, depends on the data. Now, one thing that I wanted to say in this case is the importance of, let's say, this binomial Canford distribution, or let's say some use cases. In industry, the binomial distribution is used when it comes to do or when it comes to check for the validity of, let's say, an offer I would like to launch. Example given, or I I would like to know what is the affinity of my customers towards one product as opposed to another. Okay, so this is a very common use case. Then this gets extended into machine learning, and during extended data analysis or a machine learning use cases, we may want to extend what we just said or what we just took as an example into classification use cases. So we will look into the classification use cases when we look into machine learning. But overall, if you have looked into that distribution graph that I've drawn yesterday, so I can just try to draw it once more. Let's say I have a y-axis and I have an x-axis, right? So in this case, the x-axis gives you the numbers, and the numbers are going to be basically number of trials that I've done. Okay, the y-axis is going to be the probability, right? So in this case, what is going to happen is, let's say my uh, distribution looks something like this. If the distribution looks something like this, then the cumulative distribution will almost always look something like this. Why is this the case? Because as a start, you can see the growth is slow. Over here, the growth was slow, and then it reached a peak. So after a slow growth, it reaches the peak, and then over a period of time, the growth is not really comparable as opposed to the growth that we have seen over here, right? So the growth that we have seen over here is not really comparable. So that's why it takes a value like this. Now this point over here is a probability of 0. And this point over here, the point that we have reached over here, is a probability of 1. So this is kind of a curve which looks something like this. Maybe I can draw it over here. So it looks something like this. If this is 0 and if this is 1, then within this range, the curvature or the shape of the graph is something like this. So how this helps us in the classification use cases is that we can draw points. Okay, when we look into a specific example, we can take the data and we can try to plot, or we are going to mathematically work on that, where let's say there are points. Now if the points are going to fall anything beyond this line, so if it is on this side of the line, then I say it belongs to this part. And if the points are going to fall on this side of the line, then I say it is part of this part of the distribution. If it is part of this part of the distribution, then you can see the probability is below 0.5, right? This part was what? 0.5. We took an example yesterday where P is equal to 0.5, and it came when I increased the number of trials to 20. When I went beyond that, it started to decrease. For 5, it was somewhere here. For 10, it was somewhere here. For 20, it was somewhere here. And when I plotted the value, it came to be approximately 0.5. So for 0.5, let me just clear all drawings and take another better pen. So for the case of 0.5, I saw this. So if I draw the CDF, this middle part is going to be 0.5. Okay, so this is 50% of the probability. So if I can draw a line like this, if I have any points which are falling on this side as opposed to this side, so this side will be my positive cases. So let's say I'm trying to plot all my points or all the features or the characteristics of the emails that I'm getting. If it is falling on this side of the graph, I'll say they are with a probability or of closer to 100%, they are good emails. But if they are falling on this side of the graph, then I will say that with a probability very close to 0, their probability of being a good email is very 0. That's why they are spam mails, right? So these are the application of the use cases that we try to find out or try to fit using the binomial distribution. So why I use that word fit is because after this class is over, I'm going to share you a Wikipedia page and also a formula. The formula will be there in the Wikipedia page. Please don't take that formula too seriously. We don't have to code that formula. If you want, you can, but it is not really required because we have libraries in Python who have already done that very, very efficiently. I strongly recommend that we use those performance efficient and time tested libraries rather than creating something or a code out of our own, because if there are bugs, there will be great or grave issues at later stage. So something which is tried and tested is really good, if not opposed to something which is not tested, right? So we already have the libraries to do this kind of implementation. We don't need to code it, but in some cases we may want to code it, but I would like to avoid those cases where I have to code. I'll not code, I'll simply take the library, I'll take the implementation, and then I'm going to put it into practice. That's all I'm going to do, right? So when I do that, I'm going to come to know what are the uses of the binomial distribution in the use cases itself. So I don't have to memorize the formula. That was what my point is. So I'll share you the formula, but you don't have to memorize it. What you need to know is how it is actually working, because that formula has a combinatorics part into it as well. So let me just quickly show you what that formula is, and you will be able to understand what is happening in there if you have some kind of a mathematical background. If not, please really don't worry about it, because it's not really going to be a problem if you are not going to look into the actual formula itself. So if I share this page now, you can see I've shared a page. Here is the formula. So this is the Wikipedia page for for binomial distribution. Here you can see this is the formula. They have taken one more parameter, which is k. Now this is a practical parameter. Practical parameter means this is added on the runtime so as to justify how many experiments we did. Right? Example given, if k is going to be, let's say, 5. So I have done 5 experiments. So that is what it is going to mean. Or let's say I want 5 successes. right? So let's say I want 5 times yes. So K is going to be the number of favorable outcomes that I'm trying to get. So let's say I'm going to do 10 experiments, and in all those 10 experiments, I want the answer to be in the success grade. Then K becomes 10. N is the independent Bernoulli trials, or the independent number of trials that I've done per experiment. And then I have this thing which is the P, right? So P is going to be the probability of the successful outcome, right? It may or may not be 0.5. It is not always the case that it is going to be 0.5, but we can approximate it as equal to 0.5. Why can we approximate it equal to 0.5 is because if I have two possible outcomes in a case, okay, so let's say I have two pieces of paper, it has 1 and 2 written on it. What is the probability of getting 1? The probability of getting 1 is going to be 1 by 2, right? The probability of getting 2 is going to be 2 by 2, is also going to be 1 by 2, sorry, because 2 can occur once, 1 can also occur once. That's why the probability is 50%. Probability here also is actually 50%, which means if this event 1, or the chance that I'm going to get 1 is going to be my favorable outcome, right? Then the p value is always almost going to be 0.5. In some cases, if there is bias, or if there is some kind of a variable, confounding kind of a variable which has impacted my experience or experiment, then this 0.5 may be tampered with. But ideal condition, it is almost always 0.5. It may not be. Yeah, it may not be. Now, what we are essentially trying to do is this part. This is a very important part, and this is a very important part. We don't have to code it, we just have to understand. This n by k is simply a factorial. If you remember, this is just a factorial formula, also known as a binomial coefficient. Okay, so this is a binomial coefficient which is found out by the combinatorics kind of a formula that we are trying to use, right? And then we are doing a probability of the successful outcome multiplied by the probability of all unsuccessful outcome or edge cases. It is just the simple multiplication rule that we have already learned into probability, right? We have already learned what is the multiplication rule and why it is used. It is used in case of the independent events. We know that already. So in this case also 1 and 2 are independent events. That's why we are using the multiplication rule. We are multiplying the probability of the successful events and the unsuccessful events with a power. And why we are using a power is because we are doing n number of trials for k number of experiments, or n number of trials for k number of successful outcomes that I desire, right? So that's why we are powering it to this value. And then this portion over here is known as the binomial coefficient, where I'm simply taking a calculation of the chances that I have. So this is called the calculation of chances. I need to take this into consideration because I'm not doing one experiment. My number of trials per experiment will not change, but depending on how many experiments I've done, the number of trials can change, right? So this is exactly what the meaning of this formula is. This formula is not really that critical that I need to remember each and every part of it, but it is good to know that it is using combinatorics, and it is using the simple mathematical multiplication rule which we have already seen into probability studies. And then what we are essentially going to do is that we are going to plot the function. As you can see over here, this is the CDF, and this is the expected probability mass function or probability density function. Okay, in some books, probability density function is also known as probability mass function, which is the same thing. Okay, so you can try to read this. Don't try to be too excited. I mean, it's not really going to be essential right now. When we do a deep dive, if in case at later stage edge cases we need this kind of information, we will go to websites like Wikipedia and we'll look into it. We just have to understand what is the pragmatic use case. We don't have to understand it entirely, right? The one thing that I wanted to show you is the reason why I've shared this is because although we have not started with statistical inference, there is a concept called maximum likelihood estimator. Okay, now maximum likelihood estimator is something which is, or which can be found out by doing a binomial, let's say, distribution. So if in case I have a binomial distribution, then I can do this. So maximum likelihood estimation is just a method, okay, where I estimate the parameters of the probability distribution by maximizing the likelihood. So this is something which we are going to look into later on at a very great depth, but just to give you a small overview, maximum likelihood estimation is just a process or just a way if I can actually increase or maximize, okay, the likelihood or the estimation of the probable outcome, and I can try to maximize it. Okay, I can try to write a mathematical equation by solving which I'm going to maximize it. So I have a mathematical equation. I would like to find the parameters by means of which it maximizes so that I can estimate the parameters. You see, it is trying to estimate the parameters of the probability distribution. So what do I mean by the parameters? Now we already saw that in our formula, we are using the parameters like P, N and K. Now, if it is already a binomial kind of a problem, I can't change P. P is almost always equal to 0.5. So this is kind of an assumption, but I can change N and K. I can try to have a combination of N and K, and then I can do experiments and trials, and finally figure out where I am getting most number of, or most cases of, let's say, or when I'm reaching that 0.5 kind of a threshold. And that's when we see a graph like this, right? So when we draw a probability density function, how does it look? If this is 0.5, we see a graph which is something like this. So there is a certain number of trials which we are doing. Let's say the number of trials here in this example is equal to 25. So that means for n is equal to 25 and some arbitrary value of k, I am getting a probability of 0.5, which is the maximum. So I have maximized the outcome, right, in this point. So I have gotten the value of n for which this function is maximizing. So that is the meaning of this maximum likelihood estimation kind of a technique. So this is a statistical inference technique. We'll look into it in details when we do the machine learning or statistical inference kind of things, where I'll just quickly tell you, this is just an example. Ordinary least square is a method or an estimator, which is just a maximum likelihood estimator. So maximum likelihood estimation, you can consider this to be a domain like, let's say, data science. Okay, and then there are tools which are used in the domains, let's say Tableau or R or Python, right? So ordinary least square can be considered as a tool or specifically an estimator, okay, which is used in case of a machine learning algorithm, or it is also a statistical method as well. It's known as linear regression. We are going to look into linear regression, which is a way to predict continuous values, and that's where ordinary least squares or this method or this estimator becomes one of the maximum likelihood estimation functions, which is going to maximize the likelihood of the model, right? Which means that I'm going to tune the parameters in such a way that I get the maximum value of the desired outcome, right? So this is something we need to keep in mind. Now, let's come back to something else. Okay, I'm going to close this and then I'm going to look into the Poisson distribution. So this is not really always used, right? It is not always used. So, but it is good to know about it. So let me just go back to my notepad and let me write something about it, and then we can look into the details. Poisson distribution. So Poisson distribution, what this says or what this means is that we looked into binomial, right? We looked into binomial where we had two cases which we want to see. But Poisson is another type of similar kind of distribution. Why it is a similar thing is because it is also a discrete distribution. Okay, so I should write this when it comes to uh, the binomial distribution as well, because it is discrete. Why it is a discrete? Because you can number the number of outputs. In this case, in case of binomial distribution, number of outputs is going to be 2. So you have numbered number of outputs. You have counted the possible number of outputs, which in case of binomial distribution is 2. In case of Poisson also, it may or may not be exactly 2. It can be more than 2, but it is categorical. So it is discrete in nature, right? We have looked into categorical variables, right? So the outcome or the target or the kind of classes that fall into my expected or non-expected outcome can be clearly categorized into 2 types, 3 types, and so on, right? Now, again, similar to binomial, we saw that the binomial use case is used into control, and there are example like use cases quality control, QA. It is used into banks. It is sometimes used into finances. It is used into insurance and so on. So these are the use cases that we saw. Now, similar use cases can be applicable with Poisson distribution as well. So any data, any situation where the overall setup is containing a Poisson distribution kind of setup, it can be used in this kind of setup as well. But mostly, by far, or I can say by far, the most uh, palpable uh, implementation or use case is QA, yeah, or QC. Okay, so quality control or quality assurance is the area where it is used the most, right? It is used in cases where I would like to find number of defects per item, or let's say I'm a company who is actually producing electrical transformers. I would like to know how many number of defects are there per transformer that I have produced. Or maybe I have a factory which produces cloth. I want to know how many defects, how many issues are there per 100 square meter of cloth that I have actually manufactured, right? Now, there can be other examples as well. Example given, the number of cars which are arriving at a highway or a checkpost in the highway. Okay, per hour, how many cars are arriving? Okay, is that high, is that low, and so on. The number of customers visiting a bank per hour during business peak period. These are discrete because these are not really continuous values. These cannot take infinite number of values. There is a fixed value or a fixed length or a fixed duration range in which these values can fall, and that is the reason why it is known as a discrete learning process. Now, similar to the binomial distribution that we have already seen, these also has a few properties or conditions. So I'll again write the properties or conditions. The first property is that the probability of getting exactly one success. Okay, so the chance of getting exactly one success in a continuous interval, okay, or within a continuous interval is constant. Okay, let me explain what I mean by this. So let's say I have already categorized the outputs into success, failure, and not interested. Now, the probability of getting exactly one success in terms of a continuous interval, like I am measuring the length in one case, the length of the cloth is going to be my one of the parameters, or maybe the area. Okay, maybe over a period of time, or taking time into consideration, I'm going to find out the defects that I'm getting. Right? Maybe I'm going to manufacture the, I don't know, tiles. Okay, tiles which we put into the floorings of our house, and basis the square feet, basis the area it is covering, I'm going to find out what are the number of defects or what are the chances of defects inside X area of tiles that I'm creating, right? So if there is a continuous interval within which I'm trying to figure out the probability of getting exactly one success, that value is always a constant. Okay, that value will always be a constant. Now, keeping this in mind comes rule number two. Rule number two says probability of a success in any one interval, okay, or the chance of getting success in one interval is completely independent of the, sorry, this will be chance. So completely independent of the chance of getting same success in another interval. Okay, so let's say I have two intervals. In my use case, I have distance as well as time, or I have length as well as time. Let's say the cloth example I was taking. I am not only interested to know the defects per 100 square meter of cloth, I'm also interested to know how many defects I'm getting per 4 hours of the production of the cloth. So I have two intervals. I have two intervals, or I have two continuous variables within the range of which I would like to find my success cases and the failure cases. The chance or the probability of getting a success in the first interval, which is the length of cloth, as opposed to the second case, when I'm trying to find it into another interval, which is time, which is 4 hours, is completely independent. So the number of success of or failures, or the number of defects while producing a cloth for the first 4 hours of a day, has no relationship with the number of defects I'm going to get, or the number or the probability of the defects I'm going to get for every 100 square meter of cloth that I'm going to devise. Right. So that's the second rule. Okay. The third rule, final and the most important rule, the probability of getting a successful event is there. Always there is a successful event, there is a non-successful event, but the probability of getting more than one successful event in any defined interval, in any particular interval, is 0. Now this is going to be a very interesting or confusing kind of a thing. What I mean here exactly is, inside an interval, okay, inside an interval, when I have based my experiment into intervals, my intervals becomes, let's say, distance or size or time and so on. What is going to be my event in this case? When we take examples, it will be more clear, but my intention here, okay, is to find out, let's say, if I am at all getting any defects in 100 square meters of the cloth that I've produced, and if yes, then I'm going to dig down. So the occurrence of a successful event is where I have actually found a defect, which is not really a good news, but then that's what I am trying to find. If I'm able to find at least one defect per 1 hour of work, then there is a probability that if I have 8 hours of factory time per day, then per 100 meter or per 100 square meter of cloth, I'm at least going to have 8 bugs or 8 issues, which means if I have 10 such production lines, then I'm going to have 80 defects per day. Now, to solve 80 defects per day is not only a problem, it is also a challenge for the reputation of my company. So that's where this kind of a constraint is put into picture. Okay. Now let's look into some examples, and then we are going to, or we can understand how or where the Poisson kind of a distribution is actually used in the industry, or the use cases where it is used. There are a few places where it is used. It is not used always. It is not used all the time. Okay, but there are cases where it is used. Okay, and they are quite interesting and quite important use case. Okay, now example given. Uh, the average number of uh, uh, just a moment. Okay, so let's say without going into the formula, okay, I'm not going to go into the formula. I will show you the formula. I will obviously tell you the formula, but without going into the formula, let's try to look into a use case. So the average number of, let's say, storms in our city, okay, in the city where you live, let's say, is 2 per year. So per year you see at least 2 storms. Okay, I'm not going to be concerned about what time, okay, what time of the year you are getting that storm, whether it is into the early half of the year, if I break the year into 2 equal sections of 6 months and 6 months, whether the problem or the storm is going to be in the first 6 months or in the next 6 months, I'm not really bothered about. But I know for sure that the average number of major storms in your city is always 2 per year. I want to know what is the probability of 3 storms in your city in the next year. Okay, why is this a Poisson problem? Is because I have some history, right? I have some expectation, and I'm going to use a constant as well. Okay, I'm also going to tell you what is that constant now, and then I'm going to solve a problem as well. So Poisson distribution, or just a moment, somebody was actually pinging me on Skype. Okay, so Poisson distribution, let me tell you the formula, because the formula of the Poisson distribution is really very, very easy. and it is very easy to calculate things out of the distribution. So if I'm going to code this into Python, I'm going to create a, let's say, a function which is going to be called Poisson or P. Okay, so I can simply call it as P, and then it is going to take two parameters. I'm going to call it P because it is basically a probability task that I'm doing, right? So that's why I almost always call it a P, because I'm trying to find a probability of something. Now you can see that there are two parameters which I've taken. I've taken M, I've taken F. Or it can be better represented in a different way. Let me change the terminology so that it is a bit more intuitive to understand, but it is going to be very difficult to write. So I'm going to say there are two parameters, X and mu. Why I used mu is because if you remember, when we did the definitions of mean, median, and mode, we already know that mean is represented by mu. So that's why I converted that to mu, right? Sometimes in some books you will find that this mu is also written as lambda. Okay, so I can say or P of X and lambda. I have no way to print lambda here, so I'll just say lambda. Okay, lambda sign, I believe you know, in mathematics lambda is actually represented something like this, uh, right? So this is the way lambda is actually represented. Okay, lambda, either lambda is going to be used over here or mu is going to be used over here. So it is both the same thing or means the same thing. Okay, refers to the same thing. Now what is X and what is mu? Okay, what is X? X is known as the expectation. Okay, in my example use case, I have, supposing I have average 2 storms per year in city C1. Okay, what is the probability that we will have 3 storms in the next year? Okay, please note the question carefully. I did not say 3 or more. I have to define how many storms I'm looking at. Okay, that is the first thing that indicates that this may be a Poisson distribution. Why is because I have an average term or I have an historical data from where I've taken the average. If I've taken the average of what has happened in the last 10 years or 20 years, and then I'm trying to predict something or I'm trying to infer about something happening in the next year, this is just a single value. This is a very good use case of using the Poisson distribution to solve the problem. Okay, or the data fits into Poisson distribution in this case. That is what I can say. Now, X is equal to expectation. Expectation in our example, expectation is what? 3. I expect in the next year there will be 3, and then I want to know what is the probability of that. So X in this case is going to be the expectation, right? What is going to be mu or what is going to be lambda? It is simply the mean. Okay, it is the mean of we get this from the historical data. Okay, we get this from the historical data. In our example, this is equal to 2, right? I have not clearly defined how much data I have taken. Maybe I have sampled 5 years of data, 10 years of data. I don't know. You don't know that. From the question, it is not clear. But we are told that I have an average 2 storms per year in CTC1. I don't know for which period of time this data is captured, but there is some period, right? So for some amount of time, we have done the sampling of the data. Okay, maybe I should not be putting this over here. Let me cut this and let me paste it over here. Okay, this becomes the interval. So this is the interval within which I'm trying to find out. This is the interval which is fixed. Why it is fixed is because I've already taken the sample. After taking the sample, I can't change the interval. Then I have to redo the experiment. Then the interval is going to change. So for one experiment, the interval value or the interval is going to be the same. The type of the interval is going to be the same. The duration of the interval is going to be constant, right? Basis which I already have X and I already have mu. Now the formula is this. Okay, I'm going to just put this into a new line so that formula, which I have not really completed, is equal to this. Okay, the formula is equal to this. I take a constant number. Why I take a constant number is something which will be clear after a certain stage. So first of all, I take the average or mu. Okay, I divide it by the expectation, which is x. Now this is wrong to do because in case of a Poisson distribution, the expectation, or I have to check the variation of the expectation. So that's why I don't take an expectation, I take a factorial of the expectation. Okay, I take a factorial when I want to see the rate, okay, or the inclination or the declination basis my expectation. So that's why in the formula, in the denominator, I have x factorial. And then in the numerator, what I'm trying to do, I'm going to have mu, which I will raise to the power x. Okay, so this is mu to the power x. How am I going to write? This is going to be very difficult. So I'll just say bracket x. Okay, so in this case, mu bracket x means mu to the power x or lambda to the power x. So average, I have taken it to the power x because I want to know what is the effect of x on my average, or what is going to be the chance of extension of that mu or the average over x, or if I am going to get my expectation, is I have a mu or lambda, right? Now, when I do this, there is a common problem which I face. The common problem that I face is that not always am I going to be getting rid of the confounding variables in my experiment, and that is the reason why we are almost always going to use a kind of, let's say, a constant. Okay, we are going to use a constant that is also known as Euler's number. Okay, it's a number which is statistically or mathematically found to be constant in almost all of the experiments that we do, that fits into the distribution of a Poisson distribution, and that is known as Euler's number, otherwise known as E. Okay, this is not exponential. It might look like exponential, it is not. Now I'm simply going to multiply this constant with the value. But when I do that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a power of minus mu. Okay, so the total formula becomes the Euler's constant to the power minus of the average. Why? Because I want to nullify the effect of the confounding variable. If you want to go into the proof of the mathematical equation, you can look into that, but it's really not going to be helpful. And then the intention here is that I am taking this to the power mu is because I want to nullify the effect of the biasness or any confounding variable on the average, and then I'm actually multiplying that with the average to the power x, where x is my expectation, so that I can average it out, and then I am actually dividing the entire thing using the factorial of x so that I can factor it well. Okay, so that I can take the answer, or so that I can get the average or the probability over the series of all the possible outcomes. So if I have taken, what is the probability of getting 3 storms in a year? Then I would like to know what kind of an average between 3 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 1. So it is like compounding the effect, right? If I put the values in this formula, I will come to know that there is going to be some answer, but then first of all I need to know the value of E. So E, otherwise known as Euler's constant, is having a significant and straightforward to the point value. So it is 2 point, right? It is 2.71828. So Euler's constant is always 2.71828. This value is fixed. Then I put the rest of the things in the formula and I come to know what is the value. So basis the value, I can decide whether the probability is really high to be considered or not. Let's say I get a probability. In this case, I'm going to get a probability. Let's say, okay, let's say my answer, let's suppose, comes out to be equal to 0.20, right? So if it comes out to be 0.20, then it means I have a 20% chance that there will be 3 storms. Now, as a government organization, I'm going to decide whether 20% chance is really going to cause a problem for me or not. If it is really going to be a problem for my CTC1 in this case, then I'll have to create the infrastructure which is required to take care of this situation. Right. So this is one example which I can take. Okay, there are many more examples, but this is one of the examples that I can take. Okay, now Euler constant, I would like to also tell you what is another significance of the Euler constant. Euler constant is also taken basis the natural algorithm, the natural logarithm, right? So that's from where Euler constant comes into picture, right? So but there can be more examples as well. So let's say on an average, I have, I don't know, 6 of my customers, and I'm actually working in a bank. Let's say I'm a person sitting in a teller machine in a bank, and on an average, I see that there are 6 customers who come every 2 minutes during the busy hours. So during the busy hours, in 120 seconds, I see at least 6 users which are coming. Okay, on an average. Now, what is the probability that exactly 4 customers arrive in a given minute? So you can clearly see this is the Poisson distribution. Why? Because I have an interval where my sample is taken during a minute interval. Okay, so the interval here is minute. The samples may have been taken in a 2-minute interval. Outcome is expected to be there in a single minute interval, but there is an interval which is a minute. So time becomes an interval in this case. And then I'm trying to figure out the probability of exactly 4 customers, right? That is my X value. So the value of X is equal to 4. The value of lambda or mu is equal to 6. I know the value of E, right? I know the value, what is going to be E. I know the value of Euler's constant taken from natural log is 2.71828. So I can clearly figure out what is going to be the value, right? So in this way, I can try to calculate this and I can try to figure out. So this is how I try to get the distribution. Now, why is there a name like it is a Poisson distribution? So we can look into that and maybe we can close and then we are going to look into later things into the next class. So let's say I is the number of occurrences, let's say the k, okay, or I'm going to define a value which is, let's say, k, and k is going to be, let's say, the number of occurrences I'm interested into. Okay, and then let's say I have some value of a lambda. Okay, so let's say I have some value of mu. So let's say my previous average was equal to 10, right? So until my previous year, for the last X number of years, when I have taken the average number of storms which are there in CTC1, the average number of storms is equal to 10 per year. It's very high. Okay, but I have 10. Okay, now if mu, or this can also be defined as, let's lambda. If lambda is equal to 10, okay, then y-axis I have the probability. On this x-axis, I'm going to have k. Now, what is this k term? K term is just a fancy way of representing the number of occurrences I'm interested into. Okay, it is just the number of occurrences I'm interested into. So let's say I'm interested into 10 again. Okay, so I know that on an average for the last 5 years or for some interval of time, the average number is 10. Okay, now what is the probability in the next year also I'm going to get 10 storms? Okay, then I have to do something about it, or maybe I don't have to do something about it. If the probability is very high that I'm going to get again 10 number of storms, I may already be prepared. But if this 10 is not going to be the case, maybe I can loosen up the resources, put it somewhere else. So this distribution on the y-axis, this is going to start from 0, and this is a probability. So its range is going to be from 0 to 1. On y-axis, I have the probability value. So what is mu? 10, right? So I have, let's say, 5, 10, 15. Okay, this x-axis is the value of k. Okay, this is not mu. Mu is going to come over here. So let's say if I have an average of 10, then maybe the probability of getting that average number of 10 is only 10%. So then I have 0.10 over here, or maybe getting the probability of 10 storms per year is actually 50%. I'm 50% confident that at least 10 storms will be there per year in my city. Then my distribution is going to look something like this. Okay, my peak value comes at 10, and then there is a 50% chance. Okay, so this is what has already happened. So 10% is something which may already be happening. 50% may be something which is already happening. In this example, k and mu is the same. So the probability of getting 10 storms in the CTC1 is exactly the same as what I am getting already in the last few years, right? So this is how it is actually depicted into the diagram. Okay, so this is how a distribution is going to look like, but this is the probability density. Okay, how is the cumulative uh, probability going to look like? Almost the same. It's almost going to be the same. Okay, but the only difference is that the steepness or the number of k in this case is going to change per question that I ask. That is the reason why binomial distribution is more often used to do the classification problems. And in case of Poisson, it is used for the discrete answers only, but that discrete can range between any distinct number, right? So that is why Poisson is not always used for all the classification kind of problem, right? I think we have had much. I will share some info on the binomial distribution as well as on the Poisson distribution as well. I would strongly recommend that you go through it. I will share this file as well with this example. And then maybe if we have some doubts, we can discuss. I think we can make a close here, Rohi, right? We can meet next week again and we can continue. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
Thanks.
you for your time.